After my wife and her ex stole my groundbreaking AI algorithm, I engineered the perfect revenge that left them both speechless. My name is Austin Orton. 6 months ago, I had everything: a prestigious position as senior software engineer at Tech Fusion, a beautiful home in San Jose, and what I thought was a loving marriage to Rebecca, my college sweetheart. Then one night I came home early to surprise her with news of my breakthrough: an AI algorithm called NEXUS that could revolutionize machine learning. Instead, I overheard her on the phone with someone, planning something behind my back. That was just the beginning. Strange access logs in my project files, late-night calls, unexplained meetings. When I confronted Rebecca, she made me feel crazy for suspecting anything. But the evidence kept mounting until I discovered the horrifying truth. Rebecca and her ex-boyfriend Marcus weren't just having an affair, they were systematically stealing my life's work to launch their own startup. In one brutal day, I lost everything: my marriage, my job, my reputation. While they celebrated their revolutionary innovation and prepared for a lucrative IPO, I sat alone in a dingy apartment, contemplating ending it all. But then I discovered something they didn't know: a critical vulnerability in my own algorithm. They had stolen my code but didn't truly understand it. And in that moment, I realized I had the power to take back what was mine and expose their fraud to the world. What happened next would shock everyone, especially Rebecca and Marcus. Buckle up, get ready, and subscribe for a special surprise tomorrow. I still remember the exact moment I knew something was wrong. It wasn't when I found the first piece of evidence, or even when I noticed the changes in Rebecca's behavior. It was the look in her eyes when I mentioned Marcus's name at dinner one night, a flash of something I couldn't quite place, quickly hidden behind a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Austin Orton, and 6 months ago, I was living what I thought was my best life. I was the lead software engineer at Tech Fusion Incorporated, one of Silicon Valley's most promising startups. My days were spent immersed in code, developing what I believed would revolutionize artificial intelligence, an algorithm I called NEXUS. It was elegant, efficient, and unlike anything else on the market. My superiors were already talking about patents and exclusive licensing deals. Austin, this could be the cornerstone of our entire company. My project manager, David, had told me after my last presentation. The board is thrilled. Keep this up, and we're looking at a promotion for you by the end of the quarter. I should have been ecstatic, but the truth was, I was exhausted. For months, I'd been working 14-hour days, fueled by nothing but caffeine and the thrill of creation. My wife Rebecca had been supportive. At first, she understood the demands of a career in tech. After all, that's how we'd met, at a tech conference during graduate school at Stanford. She was studying for her MBA, and I was presenting my doctoral work. She'd approached me afterward, all confidence and charm, asking questions that showed she actually understood what I was talking about. It was refreshing, intoxicating even. "You know what I love about you, Austin," she'd said on our third date. "You're brilliant, but you don't make a big deal out of it. It's just who you are." We were married within a year, and for the first few years, everything was perfect. Rebecca took a job in marketing at a competing firm, and we settled into a comfortable routine. We bought a house in a nice neighborhood, started talking about having kids someday. The usual trajectory. But lately, things had been different. Rebecca had grown distant, distracted. She was working late more often, checking her phone constantly. I told myself it was just work stress, that we were both busy building our careers. But there was something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The first real sign came on a Tuesday. I made a breakthrough with NEXUS that morning, solving a problem that had been plaguing me for weeks. I decided to surprise Rebecca by coming home early, maybe take her out to celebrate. As I walked up to our front door, I heard her voice through the open window. "He doesn't suspect anything," she was saying, her voice low and intimate, in a way that made my stomach clench. "No, he's completely focused on his project. He barely notices anything else these days." I froze, key in hand, heart suddenly pounding. There was a pause. Then Rebecca laughed softly. I know. Don't worry, Marcus. Everything's going according to plan." Marcus. The name hit me like a physical blow. Marcus Donovan was Rebecca's ex-boyfriend, a charismatic tech entrepreneur who had been circling the same professional circles as us for years. I'd always been a bit intimidated by him. He had the kind of confidence and social ease that I'd never mastered. But Rebecca had assured me that their relationship was ancient history. I took a deep breath and unlocked the door loudly, giving her time to end the call. When I walked in, she was sitting at the kitchen counter, her expression composed but her eyes slightly too wide. "You're home early," she said, sliding her phone face down on the counter. "I had a breakthrough," I replied, watching her carefully. "Thought we could celebrate." "That's great, honey," she said, standing up to kiss my cheek. "But I actually have to head back to the office soon. Deadline tomorrow." I nodded, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. Who was that on the phone? Rebecca's smile didn't waver. "Just work stuff. You know how it is." I let it go, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things I might have overlooked before. The way Rebecca would silence her phone when I entered the room. The vague answers about her whereabouts. The increasing frequency of work emergencies that required her immediate attention. Then came the company party. TechFusion was celebrating securing a new round of funding, and everyone was in high spirits. Rebecca was by my side, charming my colleagues as she always did. But when Marcus Donovan walked in, his company was a potential investor. I saw something pass between them. A look of recognition, yes, but something more. Something intimate. My friend Evan, the head of cybersecurity, noticed it too. "How long has it been going on?" he muttered into his drink. "What?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. Evan gave me a sidelong glance. "Rebecca and Marcus. They've been seen together a lot lately. Lunch meetings mostly." I shrugged it off, made some excuse about professional networking. But that night, I couldn't sleep. While Rebecca breathed softly beside me, I replayed every interaction, every unexplained absence, every hastily ended phone call. The next day at work, I did something I'd never done before. I checked the security logs for my project files. What I found made my blood run cold. Someone had been accessing my files at odd hours. Hours when I wasn't at the office. Hours when Rebecca said she was working late. I confronted her that evening, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is there something going on between you and Marcus?" Rebecca's face went through a series of expressions, surprise, anger, then something like pity. "Austin, are you serious? You're accusing me of cheating." "I heard you on the phone with him," I said, "and you've been acting strange for weeks." "So you've been spying on me?" she replied, her voice rising. "This is exactly why I don't tell you about my work stress. You always jump to the worst conclusions." "What are the late nights, the secret phone calls?" "I'm working on a major campaign," she exclaimed. "God, Austin, not everything is about you and your precious algorithm. This is why we're growing apart. You're so wrapped up in your work that you're becoming paranoid." By the time our argument ended, I was apologizing to her, doubting my own perceptions. Maybe I was projecting my insecurities. Maybe the pressure of the project was getting to me. But the doubts wouldn't go away. A few days later, I woke up in the middle of the night to find Rebecca's side of the bed empty. I found her in the home office, my laptop open in front of her. She claimed she couldn't sleep and was just checking her email, but I saw her quickly close a window when I entered. The next morning, I checked my computer. Several files had been accessed during the night. Files related to NXUS. I told myself there had to be an explanation, that I was missing something. But deep down I knew. The betrayal had already begun. I just didn't know how deep it went, or how much it would cost me. I couldn't sleep that night. The image of Rebecca at my laptop burned into my mind. When she left for work the next morning, I called Evan. "I need your help," I told him, voice low even though I was alone in the house. "Something's going on with Rebecca, and I think it involves my work at TechFusion." Evan came over that evening. As the company's head of cybersecurity, he had skills I lacked. We sat at the kitchen table, my laptop between us as he worked. "There's definitely something here," he muttered, fingers flying across the keyboard. Whoever did this was trying to cover their tracks, but they missed a few things. He pulled up fragments of encrypted emails from our shared cloud backup. Rebecca had deleted them from her account, but fragments remained in the automatic backups. As Evan worked to decrypt them, my stomach twisted into tighter knots. "Got it," he said finally, turning the screen toward me. "You need to see this, man. I'm sorry." The emails were between Rebecca and Marcus, dating back nearly 6 months. Some were intimate, confirming my fears about their affair. But others were about something far worse. "The latest version of the algorithm is incredible," Rebecca had written. "He has no idea I've been copying his work. With your business connections and my access to his code, we'll have everything we need to launch before TechFusion even realizes what happened." Marcus's reply made me physically ill. "Your husband's a genius, but he has no business sense. Such a waste of talent. Once AlphaCore announces our breakthrough, TechFusion won't know what hit them, and neither will Austin." As I read email after email, the full scope of their betrayal became clear. They weren't just having an affair. They were systematically stealing my work to launch their own competing startup, AlphaCore. Rebecca had been copying my algorithm for months, passing it to Marcus, who was repackaging it as their original creation. Most devastating of all, I discovered they had already filed a patent application for key components of my algorithm, listing themselves as the inventors. "I need to confront her," I said, standing up so abruptly my chair fell backward. "Austin, wait," Evan cautioned. "You should talk to legal first, get your ducks in a row." But I wasn't thinking clearly. All I could see was red. I waited for Rebecca to come home, the damning emails printed out and spread across the kitchen table. When she walked in, she knew immediately. Her eyes went from my face to the papers on the table, and for a moment, her mask slipped. I saw calculation in her eyes, quickly replaced by defiance. "How could you?" I asked, my voice barely recognizable to my own ears. "Not just the affair, but stealing my work. Everything I've built." I expected denial, tears, excuses. What I got was cold assessment. "It was never going to be yours anyway," she said, setting down her purse with deliberate calm. "You were always going to be the guy behind the scenes, the brilliant mind that other people take credit for. Marcus and I are just being efficient about it." "You used me," I said, struggling to comprehend the person standing before me. "For years. Not at first," she admitted, and I saw a flicker of something almost like regret. "But when Marcus came back into my life last year, I realized what we could accomplish together. He has the vision, the connections, the charisma, things you lack. And what about us? Our marriage. A partnership of convenience that's outlived its usefulness." She shrugged. "I'm filing for divorce. Marcus and I secured funding last week. AlphaCore is going public with your algorithm next month, branded as our proprietary technology. It's already done, Austin." She walked upstairs to pack a bag, leaving me frozen in shock. When she came back down, I was still standing there, unable to process what was happening. "The house is in both our names," she said, pausing at the door. "But I won't fight you for it. Consider it severance pay." Her lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "After all, you won't be employed much longer." She was right. The next morning, I was called into the CEO's office. David, my project manager, was there along with 2 members of the legal team. Their faces told me everything I needed to know. "There's been a security breach," the CEO said bluntly. "Your project has been compromised. Care to explain how proprietary code from NextUS ended up in the hands of AlphaCore?" "I was betrayed," I started, but they didn't want explanations. "Your wife is listed as co-inventor on a patent filing that bears remarkable similarity to work you've done here," the lawyer said. "Given your relationship, we can only conclude you were complicit." "That's not what happened," I protested. "Rebecca stole my work. I can prove it." "Say it for court," the CEO cut me off. "You're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you to clear out your desk. And Austin, expect to hear from our legal team." Just like that, I lost everything I'd worked for. News of my firing spread quickly through Silicon Valley's tight-knit tech community. Marcus had connections everywhere, and the story that circulated painted me as the villain, the jealous husband who had tried to sabotage his wife's success by claiming her work as his own. Without a job or references, I couldn't afford our mortgage. I moved into a tiny apartment on the edge of town, taking what little I could salvage from the life Rebecca and I had built. Every day brought a new humiliation. Job applications met with polite rejections or outright silence. Former colleagues crossed the street to avoid me. Meanwhile, AlphaCore was the new darling of the tech world. Their upcoming IPO was the talk of the industry. I saw Rebecca and Marcus on the cover of Tech Innovator magazine, her hand on his arm, both smiling triumphantly beneath the headline, "Silicon Valley's Power Couple Revolutionizing AI." Depression crept in like a fog, gradually obscuring everything else. I stopped leaving my apartment. Stopped answering calls from the few friends who still try to reach out. Stopped eating regular meals. Days blurred together in a haze of self-loathing and despair. One night, 3 months after my world had collapsed, I sat at my small kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey and a handful of sleeping pills. I'd written a simple note explaining that I couldn't see a way forward. The injustice was too much to bear. I just wanted the pain to stop. My hand was shaking as I poured the whiskey. My phone buzzed with a text message. I almost ignored it, but something made me look. It was from Evan. "Need your help with something. Coming over now. Don't argue." 20 minutes later, he was pounding on my door. When I didn't answer, he used the spare key I'd given him months ago. He took one look at me, at the pills and whiskey, and his face hardened. "No." He swept the pills into his hand. This is not how your story ends. There's nothing left, I said, the words slurring slightly. They took everything. Not everything, Evan replied, sitting down across from me. They couldn't take what's in here. He tapped my forehead. Your mind. The thing that created the algorithm in the first place. What does it matter? No one will hire me. My reputation is ruined. Then we rebuild it, he said simply, one piece at a time. He stayed with me that night, talking until dawn, forcing me to see possibilities I'd been blind to. By morning, I was exhausted, but something had shifted. A tiny spark of determination had ignited. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. Something I could build on. You're staying with me until you're back on your feet, Evan declared, helping me pack a bag. And tomorrow, we start planning. Planning what? I asked, feeling the first stirrings of interest I'd felt in months. Evan's smile was fierce. Your comeback. Those two think they've won because they stole your code, but they don't understand it like you do, and that's going to be their downfall. Moving in with Evan saved my life in more ways than one. He gave me space in his spare bedroom, made sure I ate regular meals, and dragged me out for walks when all I wanted was to disappear into the code I'd been tinkering with, remnants of projects that had nothing to do with NetXUS. It was safe, meaningless work that demanded just enough focus to keep the darkness at bay. One morning, about a week after I'd moved in, Evan dropped a newspaper on the kitchen table where I was nursing a cup of coffee. The headline made my stomach clench. AlphaCore set for record-breaking IPO next month. You need to see what you're up against, Evan said, not unkindly. I forced myself to read the article. AlphaCore was being hailed as the most exciting tech startup of the decade. The revolutionary AI algorithm, my algorithm, was projected to transform everything from medical diagnostics to financial modeling. Rebecca and Marcus were quoted extensively, speaking about their years of development and innovative approach. We've completely reimagined how AI can learn and adapt, Marcus said in the article. What makes our approach unique is the way we've structured the neural pathways to mimic human intuition while maintaining computational efficiency. Those were almost the exact words I'd used in my presentation to the Tech Fusion board 6 months earlier. They're not even trying to hide it, I muttered, pushing the paper away. They don't think they need to, Evan replied. They believe you're finished. Later that day, I received an invitation in my email. AlphaCore was hosting a pre-IPO demonstration event for industry leaders and potential investors. The message was clearly sent as a taunt. Rebecca knew I would see it, knew I would understand what it meant. They were flaunting their victory. We should go, Evan suggested when I showed him. What's the point? To torture myself? To gather intelligence, he replied. Know your enemy. I shook my head. I can't afford a lawyer, even. What am I going to do with intelligence? That was the harsh reality. I'd consulted with several attorneys, but without a substantial retainer. Money I didn't have. None would take my case. Tech Fusion had their own legal issues with AlphaCore, but had made it clear they considered me part of the problem, not the solution. My parents weren't much help either. When I finally worked up the courage to call them and explain the situation, my father's response was painfully practical. It's a setback, Austin, but you need to move on, he said. There are other ideas, other companies. You're still young. They stole my work, I insisted. Everything I've built my career on. And finding them will cost you years of your life, with no guarantee of success, my mother chimed in. Sometimes the smartest thing is to cut your losses. Start fresh somewhere else. Start fresh. As if my life's work was something I could simply replace. As if the betrayal was a minor inconvenience rather than a wound that cut to the bone. Even my former colleagues had abandoned me. I'd reached out to a few I thought might believe my side of the story, but their responses were tepid at best. Most didn't respond at all. The only exception was a junior programmer named Mai, who had worked directly under me at Tech Fusion. She sent a brief message expressing sympathy, but made it clear she couldn't risk her career by publicly supporting me. I believe you, she wrote, but I need this job. I'm sorry. I couldn't blame her. Silicon Valley could be brutally unforgiving to those on the wrong side of a scandal. 2 weeks before AlphaCore's IPO, Evan asked me to help with a cybersecurity project he was working on. It involved identifying vulnerabilities in a client's system, the kind of work I would have found interesting in another life. I need a fresh pair of eyes, he explained, and you need something constructive to focus on besides brooding. I agreed reluctantly, more to appease him than anything else, but as I dug into the code, something unexpected happened. For the first time in months, I felt fully engaged. the familiar rush of problem-solving pushing everything else to the background. We worked late into the night, and when we finally identified the vulnerability, an elegant but flawed authentication protocol, I felt a small surge of satisfaction. "This is what you're good at," Evan said, watching me closely. "Finding the patterns, the weaknesses." Something clicked in my mind. "The patterns," I repeated slowly. "The weaknesses." I pulled out my laptop and opened a folder I hadn't touched since my firing. Backup notes on NextUS that I'd stored on a personal drive. Rebecca and Marcus had stolen my algorithm, yes, but did they truly understand its architecture? The core of NextUS was complex, built on principles I'd spent years developing. There were nuances, dependencies, potential failure points that weren't immediately obvious. I began reviewing my notes with new intensity, focusing not on what made the algorithm work, but on how it could fail. 3 hours later, I found it. A critical vulnerability in how the neural network handled certain types of conflicting data. If exploited incorrectly, it could cause catastrophic failure, corrupting the entire system. "Even," I said, my voice hoarse from disuse, "I think I found something." He leaned over my shoulder, squinting at the screen. "What am I looking at?" "A backdoor," I explained, feeling a spark of genuine excitement for the first time in months. "Not intentional, it's a byproduct of how I structured the learning modules. If you don't understand exactly how these components interact and you try to modify them, you could trigger a cascade failure. And you think Rebecca and Marcus don't know about this? They stole the algorithm, but that doesn't mean they understand it. Not really." I was speaking faster now, ideas flowing. "NextUS is my creation. I know every line of code, every potential pitfall. They're treating it like a black box they can simply implement." Ivan was watching me carefully, a slow smile spreading across his face. "So what does this mean for us?" "It means I have leverage," I replied, feeling something unfamiliar swelling in my chest. "Not quite hope, but it's dangerous, cousin. Knowledge they don't have. They're rushing to market with a flawed implementation, and I can prove it. Will that be enough to stop them?" I considered this, mind racing through possibilities. "Not just to stop them," I said slowly. "To expose them, to reclaim what's mine." Over the next several hours, fueled by caffeine and renewed purpose, I outlined a plan. It wasn't about legal recourse anymore. It was about using my intimate knowledge of NextUS against those who had stolen it. About creating a situation where Rebecca and Marcus would expose themselves. "It's risky," Evan warned when I finally explained my full strategy. "If it backfires, you could face legal consequences." "I have nothing left to lose," I pointed out, "and everything to gain." The plan required precision, patience, and perfect timing. We would need to infiltrate AlphaCore systems, gather evidence of the theft, and set the stage for a very public demonstration of the truth. Most crucially, we would need to do it in a way that couldn't be dismissed or covered up. "Are you sure about this?" Evan asked one last time. "There's no going back once we start." I thought about Rebecca's cold eyes as she admitted using me. Marcus's smug quotes in the tech press. The colleagues who had turned their backs. The career I had lost. The life that had been stolen from me. "I'm sure," I said, feeling a cold clarity settle over me. "They think they've won because they have my code. But code is just a tool. What matters is the mind behind it." For the first time since my world had collapsed, I felt truly awake. The path ahead was clear, each step mapped out with the same meticulous attention I'd once given to my algorithms. This wasn't about revenge, or not just about revenge. It was about justice, about reclaiming my life's work and my good name. As dawn broke outside Evan's apartment, I opened a new file on my laptop and began typing. The first phase of what would become my most important project yet, Operation Last Laugh. The creation of Eric Lundegaard began with a driver's license and ended with a LinkedIn profile. Evan had connections in places I never would have imagined, and while he insisted everything was technically legal, I chose not to ask too many questions. What mattered was that within a week, Eric Lundegaard, venture capitalist with a keen interest in AI startups, had a digital footprint solid enough to withstand basic scrutiny. Remember, Evan coached as we put the finishing touches on Eric's online presence. You're not trying to invest millions. You just need to seem interested enough to get a meeting. I nodded, studying the face in the mirror. I'd grown a beard, dyed my hair a darker shade, and invested in glasses with non-prescription lenses that subtly altered the shape of my face. The change wasn't dramatic, but combined with the expensive suit Evan had helped me select from a consignment shop, it was enough to ensure no one would immediately recognize me as Austin Orton. disgraced former engineer. The key is confidence, Evans said. Act like you belong and people will assume you do. My first email to AlphaCore was carefully crafted. Eric Lundegaard represented a small but exclusive investment group interested in last-minute participation before the IPO. I requested a meeting to discuss their technology in more detail, emphasizing my client's interest in the specific applications of their AI algorithm. The response came within hours. Marcus himself would be delighted to meet with me. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had stolen my work was now eager to explain it to me. While establishing Eric's identity, I was also reaching out to potential allies. Mag, the junior programmer who had expressed sympathy, was my first target. We met at a coffee shop far from the tech district, where I laid out what I knew and what I suspected. "I believe you," she said after hearing me out, "but what can I do? I still work at Tech Fusion. I can't risk my job." "I'm not asking you to," I assured her. "I just need copies of the development logs showing when I worked on specific aspects of NetXUS. The company's records will prove the timeline of my work." Ma hesitated, then nodded. "I can do that. It's just accessing records I already have permission to view." Next was Dr. Lillian Chen, my former academic advisor from Stanford. She had followed my career with interest and had been one of the few people to question the narrative that I had stolen from Rebecca and Marcus. "The timestamps on your research papers alone should be enough to establish precedent," she said when I explained my situation. "You published the theoretical foundation for NEXUS 2 years before AlphaCore even existed." Most surprising was my meeting with Caterina Vasquez, a lawyer specializing in intellectual property. I'd expected another rejection, but after reviewing the evidence I gathered, she became passionate about the case. "This is egregious," she declared. "They're not even trying to hide the theft. I'll take this pro bono, with a percentage if we win damages." With my team assembled, I turned my attention to documenting the development history of NetXUS. Man provided the Tech Fusion logs. Dr. Chen contributed copies of my research papers and notes from our academic discussions. I had my own personal backups and development journals. Together, they created an irrefutable timeline proving I had conceived and developed the core concepts of NetXUS long before AlphaCore claimed to have created them. My meeting with Marcus as Eric Lundegaard was surreal. We sat in AlphaCore's sleek conference room, drinking expensive coffee as he explained his algorithm to me. "The beauty of our approach," he said, leaning forward conspiratorially, "is how we've structured the neural pathways to learn recursively while maintaining computational efficiency." I nodded thoughtfully, fighting the urge to correct his misunderstanding of how those pathways actually functioned. Fascinating, and the stability issues that typically plague recursive learning modules. Marcus waved a hand dismissively. "We've solved those with a proprietary method of data processing." "Impressive," I murmured, knowing full well that his proprietary method was my own work, and that he didn't fully understand its limitations. The meeting yielded exactly what I needed: confirmation that AlphaCore was using my algorithm without understanding its architecture. More importantly, I secured an invitation to their product launch event, scheduled for 2 weeks later. The next phase was delicate. I created an anonymous email account and sent AlphaCore's technical team a message warning about a potential vulnerability in their system. "Your neural network architecture has a critical flaw in how it handles conflicting data streams," I wrote. "If not addressed, it could lead to catastrophic failure during high-load operations." I included just enough technical details to validate the concern without revealing how to properly fix it. The trap was set. 3 days later, Mike confirmed that AlphaCore's development team was working frantically to patch the discovered vulnerability. They had pulled their best engineers off other projects to focus on this potential catastrophe so close to their launch. "They're making exactly the changes you predicted," she reported, modifying the core processing modules without understanding the dependencies. What they didn't know was that their fix would activate a dormant signature I had built into the deepest layers of NextUS, a kind of digital watermark that would become visible only when the specific conditions I had engineered were met. It wasn't malicious code, it was simply my name, hidden in the pattern of the algorithm itself, waiting to be revealed. The day of AlphaCore's product launch arrived. The event was being held at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, a showcase of the company's influence and prestige. Investors, tech journalists, and industry leaders filled the auditorium, eager to witness the unveiling of what was being hailed as the next revolution in artificial intelligence. I arrived as Eric Lundegaard, nodding to acquaintances Marcus had introduced me to during my reconnaissance. The disguise held. No one gave me a second glance. I took a seat in the back, where I could observe everything without being too conspicuous. The lights dimmed and Rebecca stepped onto the stage. She looked radiant in a sleek designer suit, confident and commanding as she welcomed the audience. "Today marks the culmination of years of vision and hard work," she began. "AlphaCore is proud to present what we believe will transform the future of artificial intelligence." Marcus joined her, launching into a presentation about the algorithm's capabilities. Large screens behind them displayed impressive visualizations of the technology in action. They demonstrated applications in medical diagnostics, financial modeling, and predictive analytics. "What sets our approach apart," Marcus explained, "is the unique architecture we developed. It allows for unprecedented adaptability while maintaining perfect stability." I watched as they ran through their prepared demonstrations, each one showcasing a different aspect of my stolen work. The audience was clearly impressed, breaking into applause several times. Finally, they reached the centerpiece of their presentation, a live demonstration of the algorithm processing complex real-time data streams. "This is where traditional AI systems would struggle," Rebecca explained. "But AlphaCore's proprietary technology handles these conflicting inputs with ease." She initiated the demonstration, and the large screens filled with visualizations of the algorithm at work. Everything seemed to be proceeding perfectly until a subtle shift occurred in the patterns. I leaned forward, tension coiling in my stomach. This was the moment of truth. The shift became more pronounced. The visualizations began to reorganize themselves, the patterns morphing into new configurations. A murmur ran through the audience as they noticed the change. Rebecca and Marcus exchanged confused glances. This wasn't part of the demonstration. Slowly, unmistakably, the patterns on the screen began forming letters. First an A, then a U, then an S, continuing until my full name, Austin Orton, was displayed across every screen in the auditorium. The murmur became a buzz of confusion. Rebecca frantically signaled to the technical team, but there was nothing they could do. The signature was embedded in the algorithm itself, activated by the very changes they had made to fix the vulnerability. "What's happening?" someone near me whispered. I said, loud enough for those around me to hear, "that the algorithm is revealing its true creator." I stood up, removing my glasses. It was time for Austin Orton to reclaim what was his. I said, rising to my feet as all eyes turned toward me, "that the algorithm is revealing its true creator." The murmurs in the audience grew louder as I walked purposefully toward the center aisle. I removed my glasses and ran a hand through my dyed hair, straightening to my full height. "My name is Austin Orton," I announced, my voice carrying through the now silent auditorium. "And what you're witnessing is my algorithm identifying itself." Rebecca's face drained of color. Marcus stepped forward, trying to regain control of the situation. "Security," he called, "please remove this man. He's a disgruntled former employee spreading misinformation." But I was prepared for this. "Before anyone moves," I continued, "I suggest you take a close look at those screens. That signature isn't a hack or an intrusion. It's built into the core architecture of the algorithm itself. It's there because I designed it that way when I created NextUS." From the corner of my eye, I saw even activating the next phase of our plan. The screens that had been displaying my name now shifted to show a timeline, a meticulous documentation of NextUS's development under my direction at TechFusion, side by side with AlphaCore's suspiciously identical breakthrough. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, projecting my voice with confidence I hadn't felt in months, "what you're being sold today is stolen intellectual property." My intellectual property. The crowd's confusion was palpable. A tech journalist in the front row stood up. "Are you saying AlphaCore's algorithm is actually your work?" "That's exactly what I'm saying, and I can prove it." I nodded to Katerina Vasquez, who stood up from her seat near the front. "I'm Katerina Vasquez, intellectual property attorney," she announced. "We've compiled conclusive evidence that Mr. Orton developed this technology while employed at TechFusion, long before AlphaCore claimed to have created it." As she spoke, Mad Dr. Chen distributed USB drives containing our evidence package to key journalists and industry analysts in the audience. Marcus rushed toward me, his face contorted with rage. "This is slander. You're just jealous of our success." Rebecca remained frozen on stage, her eyes locked with mine. "If I'm lying," I replied calmly, "then explain how my name is embedded in your algorithm." Explain how I was able to predict the exact vulnerability your team has been frantically fixing this past week. Explain the identical code structures between Next.us and your so-called proprietary technology. A senior tech reporter from The Verge had already begun reviewing the evidence on her laptop. She stood up, addressing the crowd. These timestamps and development logs appear legitimate. If authentic, they show a clear pattern of intellectual property theft.